attempting a political revolution.
We should have a loving, peaceful protest.
Politics is definitely becoming more trendy in the West. But is it a good thing that it's becoming more trendy? Maybe.
With the economy and gun rights taking priority.
To stay in the European Union.
Income inequality, corporate greed, politics.
The Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Masculinity.
Two major events in the 21st century have been a catalyst for this flux of interest in politics that we're seeing.
We're in the midst of a serious financial crisis, and the federal government is responding with decisive action.
They are the worldwide financial crash that happened in 2007 and the migrant crisis that predominantly emerged from Syria when fundamentalist Islamic groups tried to take control.
We want to flag for you tonight what may be an emerging genocide. The Islamic Army, known as ISIS, has seized vast territory in Syria and Iraq.
These have had a direct impact on a huge number of people's lives. The housing crisis affected the economy around the world, and many people suffered from that, losing money, assets, jobs, and accumulating huge debts. This forced people to become more vocal and radical in their views towards the distribution of wealth and the management of the economy. The migrant crisis has also had a huge impact on people's lives because of the sudden integration of different cultures and the clash of ideas and lifestyle that come with that. Historically, people will become more involved in politics when they feel that their life isn't going well and that it's directly linked to a large societal problem. And the direct effects that these two major events have had on people's lives since the turn of the century, I would suggest, is responsible for the rise in interest in politics we're seeing amongst the young.
We have had enough as a race. Yeah. What the fuck is that? No more dialogue. We want action. No more dialogue.
It's clear that those on the far left and far right currently have the loudest voices on the argument, perhaps making it seem like the problems they suggest are present are worse than they really are.
He's a racist scumbag trying to blame immigrants.
So what is happening? In the move towards progressiveness, those on the far left have started to lose sight of how to ascertain what's actually desirable, regularly impeding people's right to free speech and trying to claim power as a group, even though most of what they preach is individuality.
Years ago, it was liberals that were calling for freedom of speech and challenging social norms, but these days we're increasingly seeing calls for censorship coming from the left.
In response to this, those on the far right have found their voice in adopting the genuine concerns of moderates and using it to preach divisive hate and bigotry. But whilst the voices of the far left and far right get louder, those with more moderate and, dare I say it, considered and sensible opinions
Peaceful protest. Peaceful protest.
seem to get more muted and overshadowed.
All you're doing is providing press for the right-wing media. That's all you're doing.
Conversation on some of the world's most important affairs is currently being hijacked by the wrong people. If people on the far left keep trying to impede free speech in order to get their own way, or won't have a healthy discussion on immigration, and if the far right won't recognise the current flaws we have in our economic system or acknowledge the certain prejudices that we have towards certain groups, then all these dumb radicals are just going to remain in the spotlight. We have to be able to have a sensible conversation on these topics, because if we don't, economic disparity and racial prejudice is all going to get a lot worse.
Racist, sexist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim has become a less tolerant society.
So why is sensible discussion currently so hard? And why has the platform for discussing these issues become hijacked by those who simply have the loudest voice? Well, the ability to actually talk competently about any particular issue is actually quite difficult and quite rare. For example, I know quite a lot about how any given ecosystem works. I know that an ecosystem is maintained by a careful balance between organisms that rely on a population of other organisms to stay level. However, I'm not an expert on such a topic, even though I spent quite a lot of time learning about it. So if somebody asked me what would happen if we quadrupled the population of all the otters in the UK, I wouldn't know. I'd have an opinion, but I know that I'm not knowledgeable enough on the complex nature of ecosystems to say with any confidence what would actually happen. But people don't really care about that because it doesn't affect them directly. But what happens if those otters start to affect your way of life? They start eating all the seafood supplies, which means it trebles the price of fish. They start coming and invading your houses at night. Now you have an opinion on these goddamn otters. Within any given topic, there's only ever going to be a handful of experts around the world whose opinion hold any worth. And whilst most of us wouldn't claim to be an expert in most things, we still think our opinion is important. It's the introduction of emotion which gives us confidence in our opinion. Most people are too busy with other areas of their life to devote time to understanding the complex and ever-changing nature of economical theory, for instance, or the politics that come with war and drought that have led to mass immigration. But once their lives have become affected by these events, it's the addition of emotion which brings problems.
As a woman who most definitely thinks with her head and not her heart,
we want to leave. Let's just leave. We don't need all this rubbish about deals and God knows what else.
Well, I think we're getting too many people coming in, definitely. I know that for a fact.
The FBI are investigating now, so there must be something behind this one.
Yeah.
As a Muslim, Muhammad will put him on a very high status, and for us it's very offensive when someone will drop the Prophet Muhammad.
Are you disappointed in the way that the government is handling Brexit?
They're not handling it at all. It's an utter disgrace. I could do better myself.
Let's be honest, if we look at the whole mess of Iraq, I can't tell you how Saddam Hussein ran his country or didn't run his country, but
it comes down to this one fact. The simplification of politics has left it even more tribal. This idea acts as an overarching explanation for the growing intolerance that people are starting to observe in their everyday lives. This simplification means that people align themselves with sides like conservative or socialist or liberal, but they automatically adopt the viewpoint of that side on any given debate. So when a fresh news story breaks about any certain political issue, we'll find people gravitating towards prescribed opinions about that particular topic with a certain passion which should be considered suspicious. This pigeonholing is dangerous for another reason though. This obsession we have with instantly labelling people who have different views to us.
These protesters are typical snowflake millennials.
It means we're creating enemies where we don't need them. When you characterise somebody based on their political beliefs with little or no discussion, whilst you might think you're virtuous in your opinion, you're actually enabling those who are the real radicals with the real dangerous ideas to go on unquestioned, because they're being lumped in with those who have already been labelled with that tag.
Yeah, guys, I got you. Do you think anyone's here for you? Do you understand what you're doing right now? Hey, I agree Black Lives Matter.
This is something that has to change.
Guys.
Here's a rule of thumb. When in discussion with another human being, assume that they, like you, are a complicated human being with many different views on many different topics. If you disagree with somebody on something, don't label them, but try and find where the disagreement lies, find common ground, and come to a compromise. This is how a civilized society has to work out its disagreements. Because historically, the alternative to this tends to be violence.
eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
So how do we go forward? We have to acknowledge this instinct of tribal association for what it is and move on. Only a step in the direction of individual thinking will allow for real progression. We mustn't worry about betraying our side on certain issues, but instead open up frank discussions and encourage free thought. We have to celebrate the rise in political interest, but only if it's underpinned by critical thinking and modesty and conviction. And lastly, we have to utilise our capacity for empathy as far as it will reach, or we'll live our lives not just disagreeing with others, but never actually understanding them.